All right, good morning everyone. I welcome you to the Nevada Department of Agriculture Child and Adult Care Food Program on the meal pattern. Again, I thank everyone for attending today. This session is being recorded. It will be turned off when we reach the question and answer session, and it will be available to you for future on our YouTube channel. And for your convenience, the link will be sent out after the webinar. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started today. Again, welcome. This is Rose Walterbeek, School Nutrition Services Specialist for the Nevada Department of Agriculture. And for today's meal pattern training, the professional standard learning codes are 1100 on menu planning and specifically 1110 for USDA nutrition requirements. So today's webinar information, for the goal today of the webinar, we are here to provide you training and technical assistance on the CACFP meal pattern changes. And for this webinar, we're specifically looking at that target group of 3 to 5-year-olds receiving meal benefits on your National School Lunch Program sites, so those K through 12 sites. And these meals specifically are going to be reimbursed through your National School Lunch Program meals in the CNP system. So first of all, I want to welcome you and provide you a little bit of information about CACFP. So the definition of CACFP is the Child and Adult Care Feeding Program. It's a USDA-funded program for healthy breakfasts, lunches, snacks, and suppers for both infants, children, and adults. So it's a similar program to the National School Lunch Program, and in Nevada, it's handled through our Southern Nevada office. So it's been a source for nutritious meals and snacks. There's been no major meal pattern changes until April 2016 as part of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act of 2010. And this was built into legislation to update that meal pattern, which hasn't been changed in many, many years. So as you know, there's been a shift in eating habits, and diets tend to be higher in added sugars, saturated fats, and sodium. 75% of Americans' diets are low in vegetables, fruit, and dairy, and 1 in 3 children are overweight or obese. So the purpose of the meal pattern and the changes through the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act was to align the CACFP meal patterns with the dietary guidelines for Americans. It's also addressing the current health status of children and adults, enhancing the nutritional quality of meals and snacks, helping children develop healthy eating habits, and safeguard the wellness of adult participants. So in line with the new meal pattern that the National School Lunch Program has transformed in the past 5 years, we're now seeing these changes in the CACFP meal pattern. So a timeline of the meal pattern is that all CACFP and National School Lunch sponsors must implement the updated meal pattern requirements by October 1, 2017. We also wanted to announce that early start implementation is allowable. And so on behalf of the National School Lunch Program, we wanted to give everyone the tools they needed if they wanted to start that implementation earlier, such as the start of the 17-18 school year, for those of you that have those pre-kindergarten programs on your K through 12 campuses. So this would affect all program operators. Again, for the purpose of this webinar, we're really just looking at that pre-kindergarten age grade group. So those 3 to 5-year-olds, and looking at breakfast, lunch, and snack. So the updated meal pattern, the 3 to 5-year-olds is the same for the webinar. So no changes were made. Vegetables and fruits were separated out as separate components at lunch, supper, and snack. Juice may fulfill the entire vegetable or fruit component, but only at one meal or snack per day. Grains, at least one serving of grains per day must be whole grain rich, and grain-based desserts are not creditable. Breakfast cereals must contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. And meat and meat alternates may be used to meet the entire grain component at breakfast, no more than 3 times per week. And tofu and soy yogurt are creditable meat alternates. Yogurt must contain no more than 23 grams of sugar per 6 ounces. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that with a little label reading example on how you figure that out. So 3 easy steps. The first thing you need on that yogurt is to find the nutrition facts label on the package. The second would be to identify the serving size. In our example here, it is a 6-ounce serving. And step 3 is to find the amount of sugars, and in this case, it's 19 grams. So that would be a start as you're trying to figure if the yogurt is in compliance with the new meal pattern. So milk must serve unflavored low fat, which is 1%, or unflavored fat-free skim milk to children 2 to 5. Deep fat fried foods that are prepared on site are not creditable. And water must be made available to children at all times. Dietary accommodations may need to be in place for children with dietary restrictions. And if you have that on any of your K-12 campuses, please call us so we can provide more information if this applies to you at any of your schools. So for today's webinar, there were some handouts available. If you were able to pull that down, that's great. If not, we're going to be going through the handouts on each of these meal patterns with more specific information at this time. If not, we can send them out after the webinar. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that breakfast meal pattern. So for the CACFP Breakfast, again, looking at that 3 to 5-year-old age grade group, the milk is 3/4 cup. It needs to be unflavored low fat or fat-free skim. The vegetable, fruit, or both is a 1/2 cup. Full strength juice is allowable at 1 meal per day, and the grains are a 1/2 ounce equivalency. And cereals must not contain more than 6 grams of sugar per ounce, and the whole grain rich requirement is 1 serving per day minimum. So for those of you with a National School Lunch Program, a lot of these terms and these additional information should be very familiar to you because these are what is consistent with a National School Lunch Program meal requirements. So again, we're looking at a 6-ounce minimum, and we're going to talk about some best practices at the end of the webinar to meet that requirement. And vegetables, fruits, or both, at least 1/2 cup. The grain, we're looking at a 1/2 ounce equivalent, so that's about comparable to a 1/2 slice. And cereal is about a 1/4 cup. Flakes or rounds are 1/2 cup. A puffed cereal is a 3/4 cup, and granola is an 1/8 cup. So if you think in terms of that cereal grain, a puffed cereal is going to be not as dense. It's going to have more air in it as compared to a granola. So there are various amounts on that most program operators are familiar with. And again, 1 serving minimum must be whole grain rich. And grain-based desserts can no longer count towards that creditable grain component. So when you're looking at that breakfast cereal, it must contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per ounce. So in our example here on the nutrition fact sheet, you can see the serving size highlighted there is 1 cup. And the sugar in this example is 1 gram. So that would be less than 6. Therefore, that breakfast cereal is allowable. So you will need to start to gather those breakfast cereal labels to see if it meets the new CACFP meal pattern requirement. There's also some resources available. So if you choose any breakfast cereal from any WIC-approved cereal list, those already meet the sugar limits for CACFP. All WIC-approved breakfast cereals contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. So the federal website is listed below on the slide, and again, we can send that out after the webinar. So we're going to switch gears and take a look at that lunch meal pattern. So again, for that age 3 to 5 age group, milk 3/4 cup, unflavored low-fat or fat-free skim. Meat and meat alternate is 1.5 ounces, and yogurt must contain no more than 23 grams of sugar per 6 ounces. Vegetable is 1/4 cup, and there is no vegetable subgroup requirement as in NSLP. Fruits 1/4 cup. Pasteurized full-strength juice is allowable at 1 meal per day, and the grain is 1/2 ounce equivalent, with grain-based desserts not creditable. So for the operation at lunch, you must serve all 5 for a reimbursable meal. So those food components are the same: milk, meat and meat alternate, vegetables, fruits, and grains. So milk is the 6 ounces, unflavored. So no flavored milk is allowed at all for that 2 to 5-year-old age grade group. Meat, at least 1.5 ounces, and that can be the lean meat, poultry, fish, tofu, and cheese. A large egg, or 3/4 of a large egg. Peanuts or soy nut butters is 3 tablespoons. And cooked dry beans or peas, if you want to credit it under that meat alternate, is 3/8 cup. Yogurt, you can serve plain or flavored, unsweetened or sweetened. Must be at least 6 ounces or 3/4 cup, and the yogurt must contain no more than 23 grams of total sugar per 6 ounces. You also may serve nuts. So the requirement is that you may not serve nuts, peanuts, soy nuts, tree nuts, or seeds to meet no more than 50% of the requirement. So a 3/4 ounce serving is 50% of the requirement. So that's what you could serve if you wanted to have any of the following as a meat alternate. So a peanut, soy nut, tree nuts, or seeds, or an equivalent quantity of any combination of the above meat alternate. So keep in mind for the National School Lunch Meal Pattern, it's 1 ounce daily for that K through 8 age grade group, or 8 ounces weekly for those of you on a 5-day meal pattern. So the CACFP meal pattern is more protein-based as a daily comparison. So you'll want to take a look at your menu planning for the National School Lunch to see if you're able to enhance the CACFP meal pattern if you're only meeting that 1 ounce minimum on the National School Lunch meal pattern. Vegetables must be at least 1/4 cup. It may be used to meet the entire fruit requirement. And again, there's no vegetable subgroup requirement in the CACFP lunch meal pattern. So that would be the red, orange, dark green, legumes, starch, and other. However, that does not preclude you from not continuing to serve that National School Lunch meal pattern, which does contain all those vegetable subgroups. Fruits must be at least 1/4 cup a day, and pasteurized full-strength juice may only be used to meet the vegetable or fruit requirement at 1 meal per day, including the snack. Grains are in ounce equivalents, so it must be a whole grain rich or an enriched bread, at least a 0.5 ounce equivalency. So the whole grain rich, enriched, or fortified cooked breakfast cereal, cereal grain, and or pasta must be at least 1/4 cup serving. And those grain-based desserts are not creditable. So the third area we're going to talk about today is snack. And snack, for a menu planning perspective, must meet 2 of the 5 components. And we're going to talk about each of these a little bit here today. So the milk is a 1/2 cup, unflavored, low-fat or fat-free. Meat alternate, 1/2 ounce. Vegetables, 1/2 cup. Fruit, 1/2 cup. And a grain is a 1/2 ounce equivalent. And you may only serve one of the 2, maybe a beverage. So that's really the only restriction on the snack meal pattern. So 2 of the 5 areas for that reimbursable snack: milk, meat alternate, vegetable, fruit, and grain. And here's those serving sizes listed again: 1/2 cup, 1/2 ounce, 1/2 cup, 1/2 cup, and a 1/2 ounce equivalent. And only one of the 2 may be a beverage. So you wouldn't be able to serve that fluid milk with a fruit juice. So for counting and claiming, as you're looking at that National School Lunch program, all pre-kindergartners, so the 3 to 5-year-olds on your campus, reimbursable meals may be claimed under your National School Lunch Program claim. So for ease of operation, you would set that up with your site operation on which campuses you have that pre-kinder group. So the rate is the same as the current year reimbursement by category, so free, reduced, or paid. And just keep in mind that it's a straight serve option in place. So there is no offer versus serve available to this age grade group. So kind of some takeaways as you're doing your menu planning and your operations for the CACFP. It's a food-based menu plan. So as compared to the National School Lunch Program, there aren't as many restrictions on sodium, calories, saturated fat, trans fats, and or vegetable subgroups. So if you're using the same K-12 menu, you only need to make a few changes to be in compliance for CACFP. We're going to go over those. So for breakfast, milk must be unflavored. Keep in mind that it's okay to serve that 1/2 pint, 8-ounce portion for ease. So even though those requirements are only a 6 ounce, if your operation is set up for a 1/2 pint in your K-12 campuses, then you can still serve that larger quantity. Whole grain rich is allowable, so that minimum portion would be a 1/2 ounce equivalent, or the grain must be enriched. And the breakfast cereals, just do a little label reading and just make sure that they are no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. And keep in mind that a meat and a meat alternate may be served in place of the entire grains at breakfast 3 times a week. So for a conversion factor, 1 ounce of meat alternate is equivalent to 1 ounce of grain. So best practices for lunch. If you're going to use that same K-12 menu, again, you only need a few changes. Milk must be unflavored, 1% or fat-free. and it's okay to serve that half-pint portion. Take a look at your current meat alternate and your alternate portion size on your current menu and adjust accordingly. So for the CACFP, it's a larger protein at a 1.5 ounce minimum, and the National School Lunch is a 1 ounce minimum, though most program operators are exceeding that 1 ounce on their current menus. So take a look and see what you have on your current NSLP lunch menu. And vegetables, again, smaller portion, 1/4 cup. Fruit, at least a 1/4 cup as well. And yogurt, no more than 23 grams of sugar per 6 ounces. And for lunch, those grain-based desserts are not creditable towards the grain component. And the only area I would have you really take a look at is those graham crackers are considered a grain-based dessert. So take a look at that and make sure that that would not be on the CACFP meal plan. And whole grain rich is allowable. The minimum portion is a 1/2 ounce equivalent, or you can use enriched. But it is okay to serve all whole grain rich for the CACFP. And snack, only one of the 2 snack components may be a beverage. For example, that milk and juice, either fruit or vegetable, is not allowable. And just a reminder, the NSLP snack is still 2 of the 4 components, but those components do have larger portion sizes. So with the snack for CACFP, it's 2 of the 5. There's a lot of materials available, and this is a snapshot of the updated Child and Adult Care Food Program meal pattern. There's some real nice handouts from USDA that have been developed. The Nevada Department of Agriculture has also sent out a resource comparison chart. So this is really taking a look on how do they compare the Child Nutrition Program meal pattern requirements. So on it is the CACFP meal pattern, the National School Lunch and School Breakfast pattern, the after-school snack pattern under the NSLP, and the Summer Food Service Program. So that's a handy tool for those of you who are doing multiple programs and want to make sure that you and your staff know what all those changes are in all the different meal patterns. So a best practice for menu planning, really for that food production piece, is just take a look at the quantities for portion sizes for this age grade group. So most are smaller with the exception of a meat alternate. And cost is a factor, so consider those minimum quantities with the exception of the milk if you're serving those 1/2 pints. So as you see those, really that 3 to 5 age grade group, they really are smaller students on your campuses. So naturally that menu planning, you could adjust downward in terms of those minimum quantities for sizes of food and portions for this age grade group. And family style is allowable. It is a common practice with this age grade group in that preschool setting. So this still would be allowable on your sites if you were able to accommodate that. And that cafeteria service should be considered at an earlier time. You might be able to run this group of students through even before that kindergarten group. And the only thing is to consider is that it is a straight serve option. And from a program operator perspective, if you think of having all those components and everything trade up ahead of time for this age grade group, it really will ease your operation. And there are a lot of resources available. We have a link here at the end of the webinar for the Child and Adult Care Program. There's a whole web page dedicated to it where you'll find a lot of the resources available, a lot of the changes available, and a lot of the handouts that we've mentioned to you today in the webinar. And here's those exact links for resources: the Agriculture Department, the Food and Nutrition Services, USDA, the CACFP Meals and Snacks. And there's also a web page on the Food and Nutrition Services through USDA for meal pattern training and tools. The Institute of Child Nutrition has developed a lot of these materials, and the food buying guide is being updated as well. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording today and we can answer any questions you may have. And just a reminder, for the professional standard learning codes, it would be at 1100 for menu planning and 1110 for USDA nutrition requirements. So I will stop the recording, and if anybody has any questions, they can type it in that chat box and we can answer any questions you have today. Also keep in mind, if you think of any questions after, feel free to send an email or a phone call once you've had a time to go through some of these materials and start to develop that menu plan for the 17-18 school year.